Welcome back to the Full-Time Wedding Pro podcast, my friends. Hey, if you're a wedding photographer or filmmaker and you want to learn how to raise your prices, that's what we're going to be talking about today in this podcast episode and this YouTube video. So yeah, if you don't know me, my name is Peyton Helm. I am a coach for wedding photographers and filmmakers. I also am a wedding photographer and filmmaker. So if you want to learn how to grow your business, subscribe to the podcast, subscribe to the YouTube channel, go watch some more videos. In this video, we're talking about how to raise prices. So I've got my little mural board up for those of you who are just listening. Obviously you can't see anything, but I will try to break it down as best as I can. But for those of you on YouTube, we're going to be covering a few things in this video. So first off, we are going to be covering the myths about pricing. That's first thing. Second thing, market segments. Those are very important to understand if you want to raise prices. When to raise, which is a skill that not a lot of people talk about, but it's very important. And then finally, how to raise. The how to raise part is actually very easy, but if you don't follow the different parts of this video before you get to the how to raise part, then when you raise, you will probably not have good results. So watch to the very end. And then obviously, if you want more help from me in growing your business, running paid ads, raising prices, all that fun stuff, go to the link in the description, tap fulltimeweddingpro.com, or just go to fulltimeweddingpro.com. And I can help you do that. So anyway, let's keep going. So I want to first touch on the myths about pricing and why this is so important to talk about. Okay. So these are myths that I have, were really just kind of questions and hesitations that I have gotten throughout the years of being a coach for wedding photographers and filmmakers and scaling, 200 people to hit six figures and all that fun stuff. So number one is pricing is why I'm not getting any inquiries, so I can't raise prices. That's a big myth and a big question I get a lot, or a big, belief that I get a lot. And I actually kind of answered this in the last video I made about showing public pricing on your website or not. And what I've seen here is a lot of people think that pricing is why they're not getting inquiries, but that is usually only a very, very narrow problem. Typically, when you're not getting inquiries, you don't have a pricing issue. You ultimately have a marketing issue, okay? It's not necessarily the number of the price that's not getting you the inquiries for the most part, and you'll see the caveat in this video to when that does happen. But for the most part, if you're not getting inquiries, it's not because your price. It's because of all of the other things that contribute to getting inquiries. Marketing, advertising, your branding, your messaging, all that fun stuff, or not so fun stuff. Those are probably reasons why you're not getting inquiries. So if you're not getting inquiries in general, number one, you probably shouldn't raise unless you are having the very specific issue that I'll talk about in this video that happens sometimes. But pricing is not the reason why you're not getting inquiries. So if you're not getting inquiries, you need to go watch the videos on my channel or listen to the other episodes on the podcast about getting more inquiries because it's usually not a pricing issue. It's only a very, very weird random scenario that could be you not getting inquiries because of price. But in general, it's not a pricing problem. It's usually just a marketing problem. So if that's your problem right now, don't worry about raising prices. Just fix your marketing issue. So anyway, number two, second thing I hear a lot is I want to raise prices without losing bookings. This in general is a big fear that people have along with raising prices, is like, I want to raise prices, but I just don't want to lose all my bookings. Well, here's the thing. You're probably going to. So the myth of I want to raise prices without losing bookings is false because you will lose bookings. That's actually the whole point of raising prices for the most part. Now, it depends on where you're at as far as amount of bookings, because if you have 3 bookings and you raise prices, but you also fix your marketing and all that other stuff, and then you book 20 next year, then obviously you're not going to lose bookings. But if you're booking like 30, 50 weddings a year and you want to raise prices, but you don't want to lose bookings, you're probably going to, because typically, the higher priced you go, the less amount of people are able to pay for you. So then, yes, you will lose bookings. But a lot of times that actually works out to your benefit. Now, like I said, if you're only getting 5, 10 weddings a year and you want to be doing 30, then you should probably look at your marketing before raising prices, unless you're jumping market segments. But typically, when you raise prices, you will be losing bookings, but that's okay. That's a good thing because you don't want to shoot 200 weddings a year, unless you've got associates, in which case you could just fill that with marketing. So yeah, you do lose bookings when you raise prices because you lower the amount of people overall that you can market to who can afford you, but you make up for that with better marketing, which again, if you want to learn marketing, I have a ton of videos on that and I have a full coaching program about that. So if you're like, I don't want to raise prices because I'm going to lose bookings. Well, number one, like I said, that's normal. You're going to, and that's okay. And number two, if you want to increase bookings with higher prices, then you just need to get better at marketing. So that's not anything you need to worry about. So get it out of your head. Number three, I'm already higher priced than my area or my competition, so I can't raise. This is something I do actually hear a lot. And I'm going to tackle the area problem first, because a lot of times I hear, oh, okay, I'm already higher priced than my area, so I can't raise. I want to raise, but I can't raise. Okay, cool. Well, first off, you need to look at your area and you need to look at your price point. Because listen, I came from East Tennessee. I'm now obviously in Florida, but I came from East Tennessee, which is a very small area compared to the rest of the United States. And I did outprice myself from my area a lot. Like my average booking or average bookings in my area, my literal hometown, was typically about $2,000. Like that was honestly on like the upper higher end. Now, yes, there were people who did still book at like 10, 15, 20K, but those were so rare in my area that, I mean, it was probably less than 1% of weddings in the entire area. So yes, I did price myself out of my area. So what I did was I traveled. I went 3 hours out of my area, 4 hours out of my area, 5 hours out of my area. And listen, for most of you guys, if you're in kind of a decent sized location and you've got a lot of venues and you've got particularly a lot of kind of nicer in venues, it's very unlikely that you're going to price yourself out of your area. But if you do, travel. That's the solution. But if you can't travel more than a couple hours, and you know for certain that you can't raise past your specific price point in your area because there's just no weddings whatsoever at all, which most of the time there is, but you know, in very extreme scenarios, then I guess you just need to stay at your current price point. But that is such a small percentage of situations. You would actually be kind of surprised at how high people in your area can really price. Now, the other thing is, okay, I'm already higher priced than my competition. Okay, cool. That's fine. Listen to me. Most of your competition, 98% of your competition sucks and is broke. So a lot of times they suck and they're broke, not because their prices are too high, but honestly, a lot of times because their marketing sucks or their pricing is too low. So don't look at your competition. Your competition does not matter usually in general when it comes to pricing. Now, where competition does matter when it comes to looking at your competition for pricing is to see how high your market can support. Because if there's a photographer in your area that's charging 10K and they're fully booked and they're all shooting, like they're shooting within your area only, that's a pretty good indication that your area can support a higher price point. But if most of your competition is at 2K and, you know, they're fairly booked out, like that's fine, but don't think that you're only limited to 2K because 2K is actually the average, but we'll get to that. So anyway, you know, the question of I'm already higher priced in my area, so I can't raise. In general, for 99% of you, that's not the case and you can still raise. And most of the time your competition sucks and is broke anyway. So you probably shouldn't look at them for business advice. And ask me how I know, because I work with people all over the United States. So number 4, my work isn't good enough to raise. This is actually subjective opinion and a subjective fear, but most of the time, you know, as long as you've got a decent amount of experience, you've shot more than like 10 weddings, and you've got good gear and like all that stuff, and you have like a style that's fairly in demand, then your work is probably good enough to raise. I cannot tell you guys how many times I have seen photographers who have questionable work who are booking like 10, 15, 20K weddings. It happens. Okay. A lot of times, and this is, you know, a bit of a controversial take of mine, but a lot of times really good branding and really good pricing and really good client experience can sort of outpace the quality of your work. And also the quality of your work is very subjective. Like you personally could feel that your work isn't nearly as good as a 10K photographer, but the couples who really, really, really like your work would choose you every day over the 10K photographer, not because of price, but because your work is so good. So you just have to keep in mind that you don't have to have the best work, you know, ever. Your work just needs to be worth it enough to the types of clients that want to hire you. And guys, listen, I've worked with hundreds of photographers and filmmakers in the wedding industry, increase prices. I have never once seen somebody raise prices and get told consistently by couples, your work just isn't good enough. I've never heard that. Usually when people don't get hired, it's because their sales process isn't good enough, their offer sucks, or the branding sucks, or the marketing sucks. It's usually never a price point issue. So if you feel like your work isn't good enough to raise, just understand that that is your point of view, and there are 8 billion people in the world. I'm sure there's plenty of people, and there's probably millions of people in your area. There's a really good chance that even if there's only tens or hundreds of thousands of people in your area, there's a really good chance that there's going to be people out there, 20, 30 people, enough to book your calendar, that will think your work is good enough for your price point. So just keep that in mind. Work is subjective. Art is subjective. It's not perfect. It doesn't need to be perfect, and that's okay. So again, last point on this, comparison is a thief of joy. So please don't be comparing yourselves to, the amazing photographers out there, the Jose Villas, the Henry Twos out there, because yeah, they are fantastic, but you don't need to be that good to book out your calendar and get to 6 figures. You don't, I promise. So again, you just need to provide work that is good for your ideal client. Okay, let's move on. Number 5, client expectations will go up if I raise. This doesn't generally happen unless you're really going ultra luxe. Client expectations, there's a weird like inverted bell curve almost that I've seen, where like client expectations are the highest if you're like between $0 and like $2,000. Like those clients want the most for the least amount of money. And then when you start increasing from that, all the way from like 2K to probably somewhere around like 15 to 20K, like the client expectations just go down, because like they trust you and they understand that you're a trusted authority in the space, and they know that you can provide a great job and a great client experience and a great product. So they trust you, they understand you, they're willing to work with you. And then when you go to like ultra luxe, like those expectations are very, very, very high, because like you're not really relying on client expectations at that point. You're relying on planner expectations and venue expectations and like vendor expectations. So when you're at the point where you're like between 2K and like 15, 20K, you don't really have to worry about client expectations that much. In general, they go down. Now, yes, there are exceptions, obviously. Some clients at all price points are just kind of nightmares to work with. But in general, as long as you kind of have the skill of having like a kind of a bullshit detector, you can really, really see like where those clients are, and you can decide upfront not to work with them. Hopefully, that's a skill that I can't teach, unfortunately. So those are the 5 myths about pricing. Now that you understand those, let's actually dive into the market segments, because this is probably one of the more important pieces of this video. And a lot of people don't believe in market segments. And I don't want to believe in market segments, honestly. I hate the fact that there are market segments, but there are market segments in every industry. And, understanding where to price, you need to understand the market segments. So, couple caveats before I dive into this. This is just general data, and these numbers are not hard boundaries. This is data that I've collected from being a coach and working with hundreds of photographers all over the United States. This is US based data. So if you're in like the UK or Australia or Canada is actually a little bit more similar to the US. You just kind of have to adjust for the currency conversion. But if you're in the UK or if you're in Australia, I know that your all's markets are slightly different. They're actually a little bit lower. So take this with a grain of salt if you're international. But if you're US based, this will apply to you in almost every single area. And trust me, I have what's the word? I've tested this a lot, brutally tested, whatever the word is. So anyway, this is also for one service only. So if you're just a photographer or just a filmmaker, these are what these prices are for. And if you do both, then you obviously have to like kind of double that. So anyway, and also a big thing that I get a lot is, oh, well, wedding videography is priced lower than photography. In general, that's because videographers undercharge themselves, because for some reason there's more men who are videographers, and typically with men, they kind of adapt that general belief that you have to undercut the market and provide like more goods for a lower price point. I don't know why men specifically do that. That's just kind of a weird thing that I've seen. And that's not just my opinion. I've seen this over and over and over again. Trust me. So I don't know why men do that. So videographers just in general kind of underprice themselves a little bit, but the market demand is there for videography. And I've seen that. So if people think that's not true, I don't know what to tell you, because you're kind of just looking at data and saying, I don't believe that. Anyway, so yeah, this goes for both photography and videography, but for one service only in the United States. Okay, so First off, over on the left, and I've kind of color coded these to the feelings that I get for these different types of, market segments. So budget, big red stop sign, is between 0 and 2K. So this is typically what a couple who is on a budget will pay for a photographer or a filmmaker for a wedding. And the budget market, it's cutthroat. It's very hard to book in this market. You just kind of don't want to be there unless you're a beginner. Like if you're a beginner, that's fine. But once you've got more than like 5 weddings to your portfolio, you should probably raise a little bit as long as you're providing a good product. So that's budget. The average market segment. So average meaning this is where most photographers and filmmakers lie. This is also where most couples have their ideal budget. So average is between 2 and 4K for one service. Usually like the equilibrium there is between like the 3K area. Or around the 3K area, but typically between 2 and 4K is typically what you see for the most average. Like most photographers, most filmmakers are going to be pricing here. Now, the above average market, some people call this like the higher end professional market. There's different terms for it. So just to keep it simple, I called it above average because that's what it is the 5K to 9K. Personally, this is my favorite price point or price range to price in. Because you're not really working with like the luxe, like the luxury types of clients or weddings, which I don't personally want to. I know a lot of you guys do, and that's fine. Go for it. Me personally, I kind of like to stick in the above average market. So it's between 5K and 9K. This is also where most of my clients in the program price themselves, and it's a great market. I don't know. It's less populated than the average market, but it's not only going after the 1% of people in America, 1% of income earners in America rather, that are doing entry lux and ultra lux. So it's a good range. I like it. You're still kind of working with normal people, but also like they trust you. They're not price shopping you traditionally like they would be in the budget of the average market. It's good. It's a good price point. I love it. So that's the above average price range or market segment. The entry lux is between 10 and 20K. Also destination work a lot of times is an entry lux, so keep that in mind too. And then ultra lux or just lux, everybody has their different opinions on this, is around 20K plus. So that's when you get to like the 20K, 30K, 50, 100K per wedding. That's kind of above that market. Most of you guys watching this are not in that market, and that's okay. Most of you are in the average or the above average, typically from what I've seen. So anyway, these are the market segments. Now, why are we talking about this? Well, let's show you because it's important to understand when and how to raise depending on the market segments here. So more so, let's talk about when to raise. So when you're closing, so number one, the one of the first things that you need to look at as far as like when to raise is when you're closing more than 60% of couples that you show pricing to. So whether that is showing pricing after the inquiry but before your sales call, or showing pricing on your sales call. If you're closing more than 60% of those couples, you need to raise prices. A really good close rate from like inquiry to showing full pricing is about 30%. That like there are people who make multi 6 figures. There are people who are in the millions as far as their wedding business is concerned who have a 30% close rate. So if you're getting told no 7 times out of 10, you can still grow a multi 6 figure or a 7 figure business. By the way, I did want to kind of touch back on the market segments for a second. There seems to be kind of an ego and almost like a cliquey, like bullying, shaming type of thing going on in the wedding industry, where like if people aren't priced at like the above average or the entry lux or the lux, they almost like people who are priced there almost like kind of talk down to you. Very weird. Like I have been, as a coach, I have been told, you shouldn't be a coach because you're not charging 20K per wedding. And I'm like, the fuck are you talking about? Like I am friends with people who charge $2,000 per wedding, who make $2 million a year in their wedding businesses. Now, yes, they have teams and stuff like that, but like that is so much more impressive to me than doing 5 weddings a year at 20K. That's all I'm going to say. So like, if you're somebody who's like, oh, you're a bad photographer because you charge 2 to 4K, fuck you. Because like, what the hell? Like there are so many people who are so much better business owners, who are doing so much more revenue in their businesses, charging 2 to 3K than a lot of the ego people who are charging like 10K to 20K. So like, calm down, check your ego. that doesn't go for most of you, but like this is such an annoying thing that I deal with sometimes. And it's very prevalent in the videography industry. I don't know why. But yeah, anyway, that's the side rant there. So listen, my point in saying that is if you're at the 2K to 4K range and you're cool with that, great. Don't feel bad about that. It's a great, it's a great market to be in. It's really easy to book between 2 and 4K. And if you want to stay at 5 to 9K, you don't want to go, entry lux or ultra lux, cool. Do that. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, serve your clients. Be happy. Go for it. So anyway, yeah, I just wanted to touch on that because that's something I see and it gets on my nerves. So anyway, knowing when to raise. If you want to raise, knowing when to raise is really important. So number one, it's when you're closing more than 60% of couples that you show pricing to. That's one of the benchmarks that you can go after. Number two is this is listen, this happened to me one time and I was so upset. Like this, okay, so I know a lot of you guys get told, hey, you're too expensive. I'm going with someone cheaper. And that sucks, but it is what it is. But when you get told no, and you find out that the couple who told you no went with somebody who charges more than you, that hurts so much. So number two is when you're losing couples to more expensive competition. That is either showing you, number one, that you are priced too low and they don't trust you, or number two, you're priced low and your branding or your offer or even your work is not good enough. So yeah, be careful with that. As long as your branding and your pricing and stuff is really good and your branding and your messaging and your offer and your work is really, really good and you're still losing couples to more expensive competition, that's when you raise prices. Number three, you're too busy or you're not working with the right kind of couples. So if you're working with like budget couples a lot and you're booking like 50 weddings a year or whatever else, or even 30 weddings a year and you only want to do like 10, 15, 20, then that's a good sign that you should raise prices. Kind of goes in line with number one, but ultimately like I feel like, or I get told a lot that photographers and filmmakers are having burnout because they're booking 50 weddings a year and they're only charging 2K for it. That's a really good indicator that you should raise prices. Number four, this is where the market segments come in. You are at the bottom of your market segment. So if you're, for example, if you're at the above average price point but you're starting at 5K or your average 5K actually, then and you want to raise prices, then that's telling you like you have so much room to grow. When you're in these market segments in general, there's a lot of generality here happening. So you also have to take into account like the types of clients that you're bringing in. You've got to test it. You have to look at your market, like the area that you're into sometimes, like I mentioned in the very beginning of this video. But if you're in the above average price point and you're at like 5K average, you actually have a lot of room to raise prices without losing a lot of bookings. Because typically if somebody can hire you at 5K, it's very likely they'll also hire you at 6K or 7K. Not always, but it's pretty likely that you can raise prices incrementally and you won't lose a lot of bookings. We'll talk about how to do that in a second, obviously. But if you're at the bottom of your market segment, you actually have a pretty good opportunity to raise prices. Now here, the last point, number 5, is where I talked about those very weird scenarios where you are not getting inquiries because of your price point. And this actually happened to me. This is when you're at the top of your market segment and you're not getting booked and you're ready to change your brand to fit a new market segment. So quick story time. This was a few years ago. I was starting at 4K and on my website, like I showed it, I was starting at 4K. And I had a really good brand. I had a dialed in brand. I was going after, looking back, I was going after the above average market, but I was priced in the average market. So there was a market and a price disconnect there. Some people call this like product market mismatch or whatever. But for me, the market that I was attracting to my website through my ads and through my SEO was not matching my price point. I was priced too low. So that 4K starting rate, I was getting no inquiries. I said one day I was fairly booked out, right? So I wasn't in a situation where I was really struggling for bookings. I was just kind of annoyed because I wasn't getting any inquiries. So I raised my starting rate. I said, fuck it. I raised it to 5K instantly. Within literally just a day, I started getting more inquiries. I went from like zero, from like, several weeks to starting getting one every few days. And I was not running ads that much. Like I was very, very, very low ad spend. And then when I figured that out, I increased ad spend and I just, hit balls to the wall there. But what happened was I was priced under the market segment that I was attracting. So I am a huge believer that your market determines your price point. But you have to understand there's not just one market. There are a lot of markets, as we've seen. So if you're attracting a certain type of market and they're not buying from you, it's because you have either a offer or a pricing mismatch to your market. For example, if you're priced at 5K, but your brand sucks and your copywriting sucks and your marketing sucks, you're probably attracting budget. And that's why they're not hiring you. Case in point, I see this all the time. Photographers who are who are on the knot rather. And they're priced at 5K, but we know that the knot typically only serves the budget and sometimes the average. So you could be spending $1,000 a month on the knot. If you're priced at 5K, you're probably not getting booked very much. It is what it is. So that is where the very, very, very rare scenario, and it is a little bit, it's kind of rare. I wouldn't say it's very rare, but it's kind of rare. That's where you're at the top of your market segment and you're not getting booked and you're ready to change your brand to fit a new market segment. Now for me, I already had changed my brand to fit a new market segment. If you're in, this is it's a hard thing to understand and it's a hard thing to see when you're in your business. So this is a situation where I would definitely recommend you reach out to a coach who can look at your business from the outside and tell you this for sure. But if you're at a situation where maybe you're like me and you are at 4K, but you're attracting above average or maybe even entry lux, you need to raise. You absolutely need to raise. So that is when to raise. Now let's talk about how to raise. The reason why you guys are all here. Let me get a drink. So lastly, here's how to raise. I have 7 ways to raise prices. That rhymes. So anyway, number 1 is, this is actually not really a how to raise. This is kind of just a preface here. You should use the pricing formula to find your average ideal price per wedding. So the pricing formula is, I guess I could say I came up with it, but I kind of didn't. I don't know. I don't know. I've never seen any other coach use this pricing formula. And I don't know why, because it's very easy. So a lot of coaches will tell you, you need to calculate your cost of doing business and like all this stuff, which like, yeah, you probably should. But what I do here is I like to just keep it simple. And I like to take the end number and compare it to the cost of doing business, compare it to the market. And then your yearly goal revenue should be obviously taking into account your cost of doing business. So anyway, you need to, number 1, understand your yearly goal revenue. Okay. So let's say, for example, your yearly goal revenue is $150,000. Great. You know, after doing all of your costs of doing business that you can probably profit maybe about like 120 from that, maybe like 100 grand from that after taxes, who knows? So that's your yearly goal revenue, 150. You divide that by how many weddings you can physically shoot. So if you want to, you can also divide it by how many weddings you want to shoot, but I like to go for how many weddings you can shoot, because this will find your upper limit. And it will find the lowest average price per wedding for you. So that way, if you want to raise it, you can. So for example, let's say easy math. Let's say you want to do 30 weddings a year. That's the most you can shoot without getting burnt out. Cool. 150 divided by 30 is 5K. So that's 5K per wedding on average. So that means, okay, cool. Now we know what our goal is for our average price per wedding. We know the market segment that falls into. So now we know, number 1, who to brand for, and we know how to structure our pricing. I'm not going to get into how to structure pricing in this video. If you actually want my help structuring your pricing, I can do that with Full-Time Wedding Pro. But anyway, or I can make a video on it, who knows? So anyway, that's the number 1 thing you need to understand is your average price per wedding. How much do you want to charge per wedding? And that's how you know what number to get to. So number 2, this is by far the easiest way to raise prices. This is what I recommend to all my students who are raising prices. Raise your prices by a few $100s with every booking. This is the most consistent, the safest, and the easiest way to raise prices. You need to also track your conversion rates as you do this. But every booking you get, raise your prices by a few $100s. Don't do any dramatic price jumps unless you are switching markets. That's a little bit more of a case by case scenario there, but just raise prices by a few $100s every booking. That's the easiest way to do it. Number 3, use price anchoring and increase your mid and top collections, but not your starting rate. So this is a little bit more advanced, but if you don't know what price anchoring is, this is basically like where let's say you have 3 collections, and I'm not saying this is the best way to do it. I'm just saying this is an example. So let's say you have 3 collections. The first collection you have is your top tier collection, right? Let's say it's 10 grand. Cool. What that does is you show it first and you show it on top, or if you're doing it horizontally, you show it to the left, because people read left to right and down to, or up to down. Anyway, so you show it on the top, and let's say it's 10 grand and it offers every single thing that you could possibly sell. Cool. Great. That's your price anchor. Now, your couples see that price and then they compare that to every other price point you have. So you want your price anchor to be very, very, very high. And then your mid and your bottom tier collection looks very small in comparison, even if it's a lot higher than you initially had it. So your top tier collection could be 10K. Your goal is not to sell it. If you do sell it, great, but your goal is not to sell it. Your middle tier collection is where you want to sell. And again, this works if you have 3 collections, 4 collections, 5 collections, doesn't matter. So your mid tier collection, then maybe let's say we price it at 5K, and it's got what most people kind of need for a wedding photographer, 8 hours coverage or all day coverage, whatever you want to do, second shooter, like engagement session, whatever you want to do, doesn't matter. So that's your mid tier collection. And then what you can do then, let's say before you did this, your pricing was 3K, and maybe your top tier collection was, like 5K or something. Then cool. Now you can raise to 5K mid tier and 10K top tier. But then maybe you can keep your starting rate very similar or even the same, right? So let's actually use a better example. Let's say your starting rate was 3K, your mid-tier collection was 4K, and your top-tier collection was 6K. You want to keep your 3K starting rate, but now instead of charging 4K for your mid, you charge 5K for your mid. But you keep your 3K starting rate, and if you're showing on your site, nothing changes. Pretty great. So 3K, 5K, and then 10K. Now you need to be careful with that 5K because now you're going after the above average market. So with that 5K, you actually might need to change your starting rate on your website, but this is getting very in the weeds here. But I'm just kind of trying to give you the example here. If you want to keep your starting rate the same, you can raise your mid-tier and your top-tier collections to increase price. I'm not going to go any further on that. That's pretty self-explanatory. But yeah, that's number 3. Number 4, this is actually something that not a lot of people talk about for some reason. Sell more upsells and more retention offers to make your client lifetime value higher. So like every client that you have has a lifetime value. If your client lifetime value is just limited to the price point that they pay you to book you, you don't have a very good business model. You should have revenue retention and upsells. So what could be an example? If you're a wedding photographer, for example, what's a good example of an upsell? Well, an upsell could be like, okay, they book you for the wedding. After the wedding, you sell an album, or maybe even before the wedding, you sell an album. That's one upsell. Another upsell could be an anniversary session. It could be a bridal portrait session. It could be a boudoir session. It could be maternity when they have a baby. It could be the newborn. It could be family photography. So and that's how you incorporate revenue retention. You keep giving them offers. Great model, because overall now, if they paid you 5K for the wedding and you don't offer them anything else for the rest of the client journey, then you have a 5K lifetime value for your client, and that's whatever. But then if you sell a $2,000 album and then a $1,000 family session and then a $500 bridal session or whatever, now that client lifetime value goes from 5K to 7K, 10K, 15, 20K sometimes over the entire lifespan of the client. How many times are they going to want family sessions? Now, yes, you might not want to do family sessions. That's fine. What other things can you offer for retention? How can you monetize them as a client, offering referral programs, like whatever else, right? Anniversary albums, anniversary sessions, like whatever you want, right? So dive deeper in on upsells and revenue retention and get really creative with it. That's a really good way that you can increase your client lifetime value and make your overall price point higher without actually having to raise prices on the front end. There you go. Ninja tactic. We talk about this more in the program, by the way. Number 5, this is really fun. Announce a price raise that will stir up last minute bookings. Now this is risky because if you publicly commit to a price point, it's very hard to walk it back if you raise too high and you lose bookings. So be careful with that. but this is a good way to stir up a lot of last minute bookings, because people, believe it or not, are probably on the fence about you. They've probably not hired you yet. And all it takes is an email blast that says, I'm raising prices at the end of this month. If you want to book me, now's your time. You could probably get a lot of bookings this way. Number 6, this is a little, some people would say this is unethical. This is capitalism. And I'm just presenting the data to you on what I've seen work. So if you want to incorporate this in your business, go for it. If not, that's totally fine. Doesn't matter to me. You run your business the way you want to. Number 6 is you raise by 2K and you discount by 1K for a limited time. So effectively, and obviously these numbers you can change, but effectively you're making an extra $1,000 while also driving attention to your offer. Now, I will say at certain price points, discounts don't work very well. But if you're like within the average market, and sometimes even on the lower end of the above average market, this can work fairly well for you. So again, that's up to you. Every business ever does this around Black Friday, by the way. So like Amazon Prime Day, they increase prices and then they discount an arbitrary amount. And they're like, it's so much cheaper, but it's really not. Anyway, yeah, unethical, probably. Does it work? Yes, you can decide. And then finally, number 7, this is if you're jumping market segments. This is the hardest thing to do. And this is where I would definitely recommend you guys have a coach. Get clear on your ideal client, your new ideal client with the different market segment, and work on your new branding, your new pricing, and your new sales process to book them. This is a lot harder. So if you're in a situation right now where you are jumping market segments, like you're going from average to above average or above average to entry lux, you need to take a hard look at your branding, hard look at the ideal client that you want to work with, and make sure that you are adapting your offer structure and your branding and your messaging and even the actual end result, like the end product, to those people. Now, guys, that has been how to raise prices as a wedding photographer and filmmaker. My name is Peyton Helm. I have been your host. It's great to see you. Listen, if you want to learn more about, number 1, about Full-Time Wedding Pro, please click the link below. But also check this out. I have so many videos on my YouTube channel about all kinds of stuff. When to show pricing, investing in it, how to invest in education, how to stop getting ghosted, how to run ads to book weddings. I've even got client case studies, like how Alex booked 70K in weddings in 4 months and how he actually went on to book like 100K in 6 months. So anyway, listen, if you want to subscribe to the channel, go subscribe. If you want to listen to more podcast episodes, listen to more podcast episodes. If you want to follow me on Instagram, follow me on Instagram. I know I'm only supposed to give one call to action, but I'm feeling frisky today. So yeah, I love you guys. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.